And
get my notes here. My notes start.
Okay. Venita is caught up in traffic. She had sent me a message saying she wasn't going to come because she was late, but I told her to come on whenever she makes it home, you know, because I'm sure we'd all love to see her.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
So we're not waiting for her to start, but just know that she may come in at some point. Leonie, I don't know anything about. So I guess give her a couple of minutes. So you were saying, what was your suggestion about the date?
That as opposed to meeting next week, we'd have the break next week, and then the following week it would be my turn, but that's the Tuesday before Thanksgiving.
With me. Does it make a difference to you, Nicole?
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine with me. In fact, yeah, I'm not gonna have class that night. So even if we need to like go back to our normal traditional time, that's fine. Yeah. Because I'll be driving to Houston a little later. So yeah, that's fine with me. Absolutely.
Okay. I just have to be at my daughter's school next Tuesday. Huh?
It's fine if we take a break next week and then you do, what is it, love and
right.
Feminist, it's the best sex ever.
All that good stuff.
Okay.
So we'll ask Leonie, and if she's okay, we're good.
Yeah. Oh, and who is this?
Let me download.
Oh man, I'm just waking up from a nap, so I have to kind of pull myself together.
And the agenda is out there, Michelle?
Yeah.
Yes.
You don't. Oh, it is out there. Let me see if you look in the session 9 location. It's the second item on the page, right below this link to come into the Hangout. Well, I don't know where Leonie is, so maybe we should go ahead and get started.
I got it. Yeah, okay.
You know, because as usual, I have more stuff to talk about than there are hours in a day.
Michelle, you need to write a couple of books.
One day. I think I would have to.
11 pages?
But the questions that are italicized are the ones that I wanted to try to talk about. And then if we somehow have more time, go back and look at some of the other stuff. So, but let's go through, where's my book? Go through the introduction. And just welcome everyone to the Global Black Feminist Reading Circle. We are reading our 9th book together. This is session 9, and we are reading the Crunk Feminist Collection, edited by Brittney Cooper, Susana Morris, and Robin M. Boylorn. So this book is a collection of essays taken directly from the blog of the group, the Crunk Feminist Collective. So a lot of the essays you can find still in their original format on the blog. Some of them not as easy to find, but I did go through this week and related to the chapters that we're looking at. And I have posted some of those links over the last couple of days. So I don't know if these are essays or sections or how the book is organized, but anyway, we're looking at 2 different sections tonight. One is a continuation of what we talked about last week, the section called Politics and Policy, The Personal is Political, and that has 3 closing essays in it, Citizenship and Silence, Speaking the Stories Aloud by Eesha Pandit, Teachers Are Not Magical Negroes by Susana Morris, Making Movement Mistakes, What to Do When You F Up by Aisha Pandit. And then the rest of our essays come from the next section called Hip Hop Generation Feminism, Feminism All the Way Turned Up. And that includes an introduction and then 10 Crunk Commandments for Reinvigorating Hip Hop Feminist Studies by Brittney Cooper, Aisha, Durham, Susana Morris, and Rachel Raimist. Something called Lensing the Culture, Hip Hop Women Behind the Camera by Rachel Raimist. Sticks, Stones, and Microphones, A Melody of Misogyny by Aisha Durham. Confessions of a Backslider by Chanel Craft-Hanner. Disrespectability Politics on Jay-Z's Bitch, Beyonce's Fly Ass, and Black Girl Blue by Brittney Cooper. And you can learn more about the Global Black Feminist Book Group on Google Plus or Facebook, or where all of our videos are on YouTube. And my name is Michelle Odom. I'm located in Brooklyn, New York, and I'm the host of the group. Currently, we are joined first by Kim. Hello, Kim.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kim. I'm in New York, and thank you.
Welcome, welcome. And Nicole.
Hi, everyone. I'm joining from College Station, Texas today. Glad to be here, Nicole Wilson. Yeah.
Yeah, because y'all been shooting them up down there in Texas.
Yeah. Yes. Cowboy culture, I tell you.
Yeah. Well, I had to be grateful every time you arrive.
Right.
So, man.
You know, either guns or water, take your pick. What's it going to be, a flood or a flood of bullets? That's what's happening here.
Yeah. Crazy
Absolutely.
stuff. And so now it's coming out that I think he was mad at his mother-in-law.
Right.
So it's being looked at as a domestic violence kind of.
Right. Not still they want to label domestic terrorists.
The mother-in-law at that church?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, just a very sad situation.
Absolutely.
So anyway, we kind of pull back from our daily lives and worlds and take time to focus here on what we choose to focus on and not just the things that are thrust in our face.
Absolutely.
So I think that's one of the joyful parts of being in a group like this. So we've already talked about changing the dates a little bit, and he is not able to join us, then Leonie, just know it looks like what we're going to do is take our break next week and the following week and do the next section on love and sex, something like that it's called. And then I guess the rest of the agenda would schedule would remain the same, so it doesn't change really when Leonie is next scheduled to host. So okay, and then if all of us can manage to around for a couple of minutes afterwards to talk about a couple of things. I see I'm getting a message from Leonie. Let me just run over to Facebook for a minute and check that. Where is it? And come on, computer, you can do it. You can do it. You can open this page. Maybe not. Leonie, I can't connect. I'm on the road trying to connect with my phone. Nothing I do seems to be working. I'm going to try for a couple of more minutes, but after that, I'm probably going to give up. Okay. Did you all hear that?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, and now we lost Kim.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Well, why don't I just go ahead and read the summary, and hopefully Kim can get reconnected by then.
Okay.
Okay, so this is the summary of the two different sections. In the last three essays of the section, Politics and Policy, The Personal is Political, Aisha Pandit looks at the myth of the model minority, shares thoughts on allyship, and considers how to recover from inevitable mistakes and conflicts when working across cultures, while Susana M. takes on structural inequities. The section Hip Hop Generation Feminism All the Way Turned Up considers the place of hip hop in the academy, in film, music, and in our own lives and the lives of hip hop culture's bright lights, the Carter family. While using the introduction to describe and outline the contours of hip hop generation feminism. Advice to scholars studying hip hop and feminism, and a counter narrative of films documenting the role of Black women in hip hop culture. The writers in this section, Brittney C. Cooper, Susana M. Morris, Aisha Durham, Rachel Raimist, and Chanel Craft Hanna, violence in some of the lyrics challenge women to consider their own commitment to feminism and ponder new directions as hip hop's icons begin to age. So Kim, did you get the agenda?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Do you want to start us off reading section on citizenship and silence?
Sure. Politics and policy where personal is political. I'm hearing some feedback. I don't know why. Citizenship and silence. Speaking the stories aloud by Eesha Pandit. Eesha Pandit shares some experience with racism as she faced as a South Asian in America, like messages of hate shoved into her mailbox or being called a terrorist for bumping into a man on a New York City subway platform. She reviews some of the lore and history of the myth of the model minority, describing it as a direct backlash to the civil rights movement designed rollback civil rights policies. This powerful myth, which denies the impact of privilege, seduces many immigrants to America. In sharing some thoughts on allyship, Pandit makes a case that all immigrants of color have a stake in rallying around the call for Black Lives Matter, even though ideally they would do so without self-interest. Finally, making space for the stories of immigrants is Pandit's way of encouraging the use of our voices in challenging racism, white supremacy, violence, and patriarchy in our homes, communities, and workplaces. Some of us speak up and speak out, riot and rise. Other of us recoil, quiet, and rage, and lower our heads and our eyes. This silence is also functional. Our stories die in our throats. Question 1. Discuss the
Let's Kim, you know what? Let's just read the questions that have italics. So in this case,
alrighty. Question 3. Is there a model minority myth that applies to some segment of the African American community? And if so, are some seduced by it? Consider the investment attachment some have to respectability politics.
okay, thank you.
Well, you're welcome.
Anybody? Nicole, you can unmute if you're ready to
Okay,
talk.
yeah, I'm unmuted. Hang on here. I'm going back to the question. Yeah, the model minority myth. So mainly when I've engaged a model minority myth, it's kind of been pushed on to Asians, like a part of the Asian American immigrant narrative as a model minority. And so I can definitely see how that plays out in media, mass media, and can be like a positive stereotype for Asian Americans, but also a stereotype that can demean and belittle and, calls into question, like we start seeing some mental health challenges, for that group as well. So I engage that myth, in relation to Asian Americans. But in as much as Black Americans are concerned, there is definitely, I think the myth operates there as well. And again, you know, it operates on many levels, like social class, or we start talking about education. But are we seduced by it? Well, let me just speak for myself. I have gotten to the point where, you know my subjectivities. I'm comfortable talking about my subjectivities, and I own that. So grew up, very Southern, working class, Black woman. And I don't really, at this point in my life, at this stage, my journey, I don't really have time for people who need to always go along to get along and need to play nicely. I have encountered many in academia, many middle class, upper middle class Black Americans. I've even had people say, oh, it's just going to be too much if you and I sit near each other at the meeting, as if that I don't have time for. So what I start doing, because again, my primer, my pedagogy is coming from Octavia Butler. And again, I'm teaching myself how to fly. So I'm just letting those people go. I start to understand I can be cordial, but I can't work with you. Because when, bodies are in danger here, and I don't have time to, play nice. So yes, I do think people are still seduced by that myth. I, however, am not.
Well, I agree, and yeah, I do think that there is a segment of the community that is seduced by this myth. It's, I guess, not called the model minority myth for us, but like the good Negro.
Mm-hmm.
But this question, this essay also made me think about, I have a couple of friends who are very well educated and, and have had some great opportunities during their career. But they talk about a time in the 60s when some of the big schools were going into Black neighborhoods and really plucking the cream of the crop, and and offering them all of these kinds of opportunities. And so as they sort of reflect on the not the end result, but as they reflect on part of what has happened over the decades and the sort of brain drain that we see in a lot of Black communities. It's hard not to think that we have been subjected to yet another form of manipulation, another form of divide and conquer. That has some real serious kinds of implications for us. So, I do think that there are a lot of us who have been quite innocently seduced by the sort of promise of, you don't have to live like those people. And so, you know, you then become willing to separate yourself physically, emotionally, spiritually, and every other kind of way. And so I think it's some of those people that, you know, when you hear this sort of vitriolic anger toward this ideal of respectability that some younger people have, I think that's, you know, I think that's some of what they're looking at. That to the extent that you think that by separating yourself from Black people so that you can go over here and get these benefits and goods and services, that is going to be a benefit to the community. It's not. You know, it may be a benefit to you individually and personally. But what's happening to the masses of us, it is pretty ugly. And so, you know, and so in a sense, it's as if you're being used to help, you know, to help bring down the community, a community that really has been under genocidal threat for a long time. So. Kim, what about you? Any thoughts about that essay?
I thought the question was outstanding. What comes to mind is a couple of things. One, I think we still struggle with colorism, that there is still this level of, depending on your complexion, there is this division. And you see it. I remember when I was adopting my daughter, somebody actually returned the child because the African American child was too dark. These are our people.
What?
And so that would not lend itself to them and their concept of respectability. And so I do think that there is something where I wonder if there's a study that kind of says, when you look at police brutality, if you look at complexions, I'm wondering how dark you have to be to excite that level of violence in certain police officers. So I think that to have a certain look or have a certain, like there are people I know that dress a whole different way. They're dressed completely outside of their culture because they want to get home at night. They want to assimilate that respectability because they want to get home at night. And so when they're in their house and feeling secure, you know, they can change how they dress and whatnot. But the goal is to not be the one that's being fired at. And so anything that you can do in this country to not be fired at, it's a hard place to be. And then the other thing, this is just me personally, I sometimes have these standards because of the generation I grew up in. Like the stuff that the younger folks do, oh God, I sound like 100 years old saying that. The stuff that the people in their teens and 20s do now, I just would never ever do that because I feel like it confirms certain stereotypes.
Yeah.
And that I find very hard. And so if I'm looking at some of the Black cable networks and you see that they have marathon days of cops, lady cops of Dallas, cops of this, and police officers. They have these cop shows, and you have all of these poor people being arrested on camera. they're at the lowest of the low. When the police have to come to your house, that's not the model minority.
Right.
So why?
But I think
why do we air that? Why is that aired?
And so for me, I feel like it's almost creating a thing, calling it to be, and then being mesmerized when it performs as the thing it was created to be. So in other words, one of my classmates posted something on Facebook, and there was this video of these Black women at Chuck E. Cheese's, like their kids had a birthday party and they were actually fighting. But I'm like, why do you share the video? But secondly, my question is, and you would think that traumatized people would do anything but act out trauma? Like, if they're not getting the professional help, and let's talk about, this pipeline, because when we start talking about resources being cut and taken and divested from urban communities, we're also talking about access to counselors, access to, psychiatric meds, and so on. Why are we shocked when people, act out this drama? Why are we shocked when we see ritualistic practices? I don't really, get that. And what I have personally learned is that it is so interesting when people are free to share their thoughts. Namely, when I'm talking about like the dominant culture, and you discover what they really think of people like you who share your skin color. So it doesn't matter what I do, I'm already operating as a myth and, this stereotype. We all are and do. So I don't see a way around it is what I'm saying. And so that's why I'm so quick to critique respectability politics, because, Black men were killed. Like, okay, Philando Castile was in a car with a child and a woman. And we already know Black womanhood is, who cares about Black womanhood but us, right? But he was not, on the corner drinking a 40. You know what I'm saying? Like those were not like those stereotypical images of Black manhood or Black maleness. And he could still be killed. I just don't see what respectability, where it has gotten us. And I also acknowledge that the way we dress and speak and all, those are all rhetorical. They have a rhetorical effect. I acknowledge that, but I think that's what's like this generational, the disconnect is because that's really what the hip hop generation is like. Okay, we saw our parents a part of this, post civil rights, post-Black pride / Black power movement, and move into these, quotas, these, whether it's in the academy or on jobs, affirmative action. And then we saw the backlash and ways in which this did nothing. And we don't even talk about like trauma and those people who were the first to integrate schools or the first and only Blacks to be on their jobs. I mean, surviving in isolation, how good is that? So that's why there's this ambiguity, around hip hop music and this generation, because we saw previous generations whereby it's like, okay, y'all were so-called integrated, but how are you that much better off? I don't know if you all have heard Solange's A Seat at the Table, but she actually interviewed her father, Matthew Knowles. You know, he can be problematic. I mean, but like having this pervasive anger and realizing like he was one of the, affirmative action and being bused to an integrated school, but being called a nigger every day. Like, what did that do to them psychologically, and how did they come back and release that trauma within their families? You know, these are questions. So anyway, I'm just saying that the respectability politics and ways in which we still fail to address trauma is quite literally killing us.
Excellent points. Thank you, Nicole.
The only thing I would add, Nicole, is that when you look at some of the Black bodies that have been murdered by police. Hey, Venita. Hi, girl.
Hey, Venita. So good to see you. I'm so glad to have you.
I am so excited. I don't know what to do. That's why I got caught in the traffic accident up there on 91.
Good to see you.
Oh, I'm so happy to see you guys. I'm sorry I'm late, but I was so anxious. And I was 45 minutes away, and some fool ran to the back of another fool, and I got caught up on the highway. So, but I'm here, and I'm so glad to see y'all.
Well,
happy to have you.
Introduce yourself for the video.
Venita Walker. Welcome.
Hey.
I'm welcome.
And you are joining us from Connecticut. You're joining us from Connecticut.
I'm joining from Connecticut, where it's nice and cold.
Oh, wow.
Well, we're glad to hear. We're glad to hear. So Kim, did you want to finish your point?
Yes, I just wanted to say that I've noticed that it's some of that same respectability politics and some of the victims of police brutality that has us with our boots on the ground. Because when you look at the Sandra Blands and you look at the Trayvon Martins and you look at them, it's always their respectability that gets all of these extra boots on the ground. So there is that within us that says, oh, he was a student, this one was a lawyer, this one was just sitting in his car with his wife. But at the same token, even if he had his pants down to his ankles, he should not be tried and convicted and sentenced on the street. There's a court system here.
That's so true.
So, I'm sorry,
especially when you see the white men carrying tiki torches and pushing, against the police lines. It's like, wow, you all are not going to shoot. Like, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. They were literally pushing. I wouldn't dare.
Well, what about the ones who have their automatic weapons? What about the ones with the automatic weapons?
Right, absolutely.
March the streets with automatic weapons. Let me walk down this street with an automatic weapon. That's the day I'm not coming home.
Exactly.
Venita, we're on question 1. I'm really trying to move us off because the questions and we can handle. But the question, we were looking at question 3 on the model minority and what we see in and so you may not have been able to connect what we were talking about, but that's where we were. And so did you want to say anything about that question, the model minority?
No, we can kind of move along because you do have a host of questions here, Michelle.
Okay. All right, I don't have anything italicized on teachers or magical Negroes, but I do just want to say on that essay, I cannot get that image of students sitting in class watching Jerry Springer out of my head. And I have talked about it a number of times because it's just like, what the hell?
Yeah.
What the hell? So that was something. Let me see. I'm going to skip the one. I'm going to skip making movement mistakes that has the role play, and come back to it. Have time, or maybe I'm not. Let's see. Okay, let's go down to page 8. The microphones. And Nicole, would you read that section, please?
Yes. Sticks, Stones, and Microphones, A Melody of Misogyny by Aisha Durham. Hip Hop and Music. Sticks and Stones recognizes the emotional pain attending hurtful words in hip hop music, especially when they are virtually inescapable. Durham's description of managing misogyny and the effort involved in tuning out sounds of hate reminds me of what Bell Hooks described as Beyonce's terrorism. Words, tone, volume, intent, and images that denigrate women constitute a form of violence that seeks to dehumanize and requires this generation of women to learn new ways of coping. Words hurt. So number one, question one.
Let's just look at question 2 right now.
Okay, so question 2, sorry about that. Do you find yourself seeking ways to manage misogyny? And if so, what strategies, methods, techniques, or tools can you share? It's a good question.
Anybody? I don't think I so much have that as an issue in my life right now, but only because my technique is completely out.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And so, you know, I mean, it's hard when it's in the air, you know, when you're walking down the street and it's in the air and it's, you know, and you really can't get away from it. Which I think is what Bell Hooks, not talking about misogyny, but just the sort of subliminal messages that come through, not just in Beyonce's music, but she used Beyonce as an example. Mm-hmm. And so it's taken a lot of backlash for that. However, I do think there's something to, you know, this idea that words have a certain power, that they influence us to feel a certain kind of way, and that this is increasingly becoming a world where you can't tune out. You can't. I mean, I think, you know, we didn't talk about the terrorist attack on New York last week, but we did talk a little bit about the man who went into the church in Texas
Mm-hmm.
And killed, what, almost 30 people? You know, those may not be examples at all, but my point is that it's like we're all on some kind of crazy here lately. It's like the brain is just on overload and can't do another thing, can't take another thing. And I think as human beings, we do need a certain amount of peace and quiet.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And even love
Yes.
in our lives. And the fact that we are just swimming in hate is really all taking its toll. And some people can take more than others. And some people are completely on snap station.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I'd love to hear what other techniques people have. My strategy is to tune out, but of course, that is why I am always disconnected from what is going on in the world at a given moment, because it really is my survival strategy.
Right. Yeah, for me, and I guess I'm kind of placing this in a different context, more impersonal, but still very central to my life, in the classroom. Okay, I'm back.
You kind of froze.
Okay.
Okay.
So teaching at a predominantly white institution as, you know, a Black woman, it can be very challenging. And what Durham would be describing as misogyny, I have to describe it as like a racist misogyny. So it's definitely, you know, it's a race, gender, and social class issue. So what I have had to do is, you know, first and foremost, not be the stock character, the mammy who's like concerned about everybody's, you know, feelings, which is hard because Bell Hooks definitely has impacted my life and my pedagogy. So she talks about it's a certain engaged liberatory pedagogy, and I consider, you know, myself, I'm an engaged liberatory pedagogue. And with engaged pedagogy, you care about presence, you know. So even though I'm deeply invested in engagement, active learning, presence, but I have to make sure, you know, I'm not perceived as, you know, the big Black mammy, and especially now that I've gained weight, like, you know, I'm not the big Black mammy, like, oh, is everybody okay? You know, your feelings, what are you okay? And, you know, just attending to everyone's feelings. I also have to be certain that I'm not being disrespected. So the way in which I manage that is, you know, it's really sad because I have to make sure that my course is, you know, planned in a way that it's personal, but not too personal. You know, does that make sense? Like there's a healthy distance, and that I can back, because they are, you know, I have found that students that I teach undergrads, they quickly attempt to report me. They want to discipline me with course evaluations. They like to go to the writing center and, you know, ask, like, once I grade their essays, they're like, oh, did she give me which I understand they do this to other professors, like, oh, did I deserve this grade? But there is a different tint to this. for me, it's like almost calling Blackness and making it synonymous to incompetence, you know. So I have to keep a healthy distance because I know that, you know, as a woman, they expect to be nurtured. And it's not just myself, but my white female colleagues say the same thing. But for me, it's on a, like, to the nth degree, right? And so that's how I deal, you know, in the classroom, how I find myself dealing with misogyny. But I guess I'm curious. I guess if we could separate race from that conversation, then we would have to be more or less talking in the context of Black men or Black women who practice patriarchy, or whose everyday practices are, you know, hold the residue of patriarchy. So I guess I'm curious, like, do you all, when you engage that question, did you all, you know, how is it easy for you all to separate? Like, when you speak of misogyny, does race kind of always still come into play? Is it hard to tease those things? You know, I'll make them two different things. I was wondering that.
Yeah, it is. It is hard. It's hard for me. Kim or Venita, did you want to say anything about that question?
Well, I'm probably where you are, Michelle. You know,
Huh?
I'm probably at the space that you're in. I just, at this point in my life, I just feel overstimulated by it all. Because there's so many things going on at one time. Maybe 25 years ago, nothing has changed, but it still felt like there was less that was going on. So I was able to address specific things, specific matters, specific issues. But now I just sort of checked out for my own mental health and physical health. I can't even address misogyny or anything else at this point. I really don't have a desire, I must say, because it's just so much. I feel overwhelmed. 25 years ago, yes, I addressed things head on. You know, everything was addressed. But now, I don't know what to address, or if am I going too far over here, or as you said, am I getting this confused and entwined with this? Is that what I really see? Because what you see now is, most of it's an illusion, so you don't even know what you see or what you hear or what to feel. 25 years ago, I didn't find everything to be so illusional. It was more concrete. Whether it was good or bad, it was concrete. Now, hope I explained myself well with that. I just don't know.
I think for me, at the end of the day, everything wrong in this country is the Black woman's fault, and she is to be hated, despised, mistreated, kidnapped, yada 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 yada. And I find that, you know, more and more our girls are being snatched off the street. So I think that they're up in the ante to not only having the hate speak, but also having those hateful acts. And so it's a frightening time when you hear that, you know, people are being pulled into cars and you never hear from them again. So I don't know if they're depending on the age of the person, if it's all for, you know, free labor, or if it's more darker and even more twisted. So, but for me personally, I I try to address it for a little bit, and sometimes I find myself climbing the ladder up against the wrong wall and just saying, you're not going to be able to influence this person. Why are you having this conversation? But there's a need for me not to walk away and make it look like I agree to the nonsense. That when I hear something, and whether it's an African American man talking about how if it wasn't for black women, such and such and such, and then what I like to do is ask lots of questions and say, well, how do you figure? And what does she do? And how did this work? And why aren't you your own advocate? How can you, so that helps me. But the thing that burns my biscuits the most is that in some of the activism that we do, there are times when a white male will step into the room and black advocates give him the floor and give him the best seat at the table for nothing that he has earned. He's done nothing to earn that. But at the same time, he is seen as the visionary. And so I will call that out every single time. And I think that's going to get me kicked out of some places too.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Let's do Confessions of a Backslider. I'll read them. Hip hop in our own lives / commitment to feminism. Going in hard for feminism, Chanel Craft Tanner did a backslide to a time when her life was uncomplicated by the contradictions feminism lays bare. She's back though and ready to crunk for the Lord, LORDE. Challenges us to consider our own commitment to feminism, especially given the way it tends to leave us at odds with many people, us. Question 4, if women were to toss the label of feminism, yet maintain their right to claim human rights as their own, would those who opposed feminism be any more comfortable with women? We have revolutionary or even evolutionary progress without conflict. Anybody? Nicole, you're muted.
Muted, yeah. That's a really good question. Because for one thing, feminism, as we all know, it's not a utopic means to an end. It just does not exist for us. Even when we start talking like, oh, if we put the descriptive black, place that in front of feminism, black feminism, or even if I kind of slant that a little and use Alice Walker's definition of womanism, I mean, there's still no utopia. We are still caught in these race and gendered bodies in the midst of a brutal political economy. And we are attempting to survive. So, I hear it. Okay, I was hearing an echo. So let me go back to the question. Can we have revolutionary or even evolutionary progress without conflict? I would love to see that day. I'm not optimistic. And that's why I think we have found some type of peace in literature. That's why we have turned to reading literature that allows us to, it's cathartic, kind of like a means of cleansing and building community. but also to call out, to discuss, and to deal with these other issues. But the problem is these issues are at so many different levels. Like, yes, I can handle what's occurring for the most part at the micro level, but meso and macro, you know, where it takes a collective, what happens then? These issues are so large and so steeped in the history of this nation that I'm not, you know, we talk about revolutionary change, but even evolutionary change, I'm not even so optimistic about. Yeah. So I'm sorry, y'all. I'm just not. I'm not optimistic today.
We all have our moments. It's all right. I am optimistic today. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that you can have change, any kind of progressive change, without some level of conflict. Hopefully, the conflict doesn't have to be violent, but sometimes even that. But preferably, we can teach ourselves as a species to move with as little violence as possible. And so I agree, Nicole, that reading is one to kind of help move us in that direction. What I would say to you about change at the micro versus the macro level is I think the reality, I believe the reality is that the only thing we really have any real control over is occurring at the micro level, ourselves. And we don't even have that much. You know, I've got this new autoimmune disease going on, you know, so it's just like my body saying, you know, I'm gonna do what I want to do, and I'm trying to tell it, no, we're not going out like that. And it's like, oh, you know, so my point is, we have some control over ourselves, but even that is not absolute. And so where we get into trouble, I think, all the time is trying to force our will onto other people. And if we can't really even control everything that we do and that happens to us, then, you know, it just seems delusional to me to think that we can control what somebody else does. You know, the expression, to force a man against his will is to leave him of the same opinion still. And so you be physically bigger and stronger and have better weapons and more guns and bombs and whatnot, and you may be able to physically force a certain act out of another person. You may be able to physically enslave another person. Nevertheless, and psychologically, they still maintain a level of control that you can't touch.
Yeah.
So we never really have control over what happens at the macro level. But if we at controlling what happens at the micro level. It is the microns, it is the little parts that make up this whole. I wish were a better whole. Not better as individuals, we would have a better whole, ultimately. So that's, so that is where my mustard seed of optimism comes from. But in terms of the label feminism, and the reason, I use it as a part of this group is because I do think that a whole lot of misunderstanding and a whole lot of anger and backlash and heartbreak and breakup and, drama and trauma with that word. But I think at the bottom line, what we're talking about, whether you call it womanism or Africana womanism or Huchakulanda Sumanana or Kalamunda,
yeah,
whatever you call it, talking about is a situation of women and girls being hated simply because of their birth or being an external force trying to force a certain behavior, a certain role, a certain control over our as human beings. Single aspect of our birth. And so I really don't think it matters what you call it. This need in the population to try to control other people is really what I think is problematic, and really what I think as human beings, we're never going to have peace on earth until we begin to understand that one human being doesn't have any more access to human rights than any other human.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I guess what came up when you were talking, Michelle, for me is that you may not be able to control them, but you can educate them into your will. And so when you think about the fact that just the manufacturing of the term white race is fairly new, and we have internalized that to the point where you don't have to force me to believe that I belong sorted this way, because I've already been educated or miseducated, listening to untrue narrative that says this is the way things are. So that is what comes to mind, and I know that you were speaking at a different level. So, but that's what kept coming up for me, and for me personally, on the macro level, it just feels like I wake up every day and I just say, what nightmare today? Okay, what's the nightmare for today? And I forget that I have some power and some control, and I need to take a lot of time to do what Nicole was saying, is to let go of some of the trauma. To find practices like meditation and yoga and some of the things that Venita was talking to us about in terms of when we were studying the Tao, to really say, I'm responsible for the well-being of my body and my emotional state. And that means that if too many stressors come, I have to find ways to de-stress. That's on me. And sometimes I forget that, because it's like one tragedy too many, and each tragedy you want to do take some action to feel empowered when that may not be the actual thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't answer the question, and I hope that's okay.
No, that was okay. That was perfectly okay.
Venita, any comments?
Yeah, I believe that the world is just afraid of the word feminine, female, period. Because female and feminine means of the mind. We are the thinkers, and of the thinkers that may be other than us, and they could be from Mars very well, we're the higher thinkers. And the word feminine scares them because if you acknowledge the higher thinkers, then you can't do the hard. You can't do the masculine. You can't do the capitalism. You can't do the ego. You can't do the beat down. You can't do any of that. So they retaliate against anything that's female because that takes away all of that. And the white man, whenever he feels threatened, it could be a piece of air, it could be a roach, anything. By the mind, it means it takes away his control because it's bullying. It's all bullying. Bullying for the power, bullying for the beat the woman down, bullying. And it's just something he can't handle.
Wow.
So I don't think it's about labels. I think it's just the world's afraid of feminine. But I will say, until the world starts to acknowledge us and treat us well, this bitch is gonna burn down. It's gonna flood. You can go to any, nothing's gonna be able to help the world. And that's the fear. That's the
wow. Yes.
I was in the grocery store yesterday, and this is a small tidbit on the lighter side. And in my area, almost overnight, there's a huge population of Asian, particularly Indians. And you know, lately, white men been really going off a lot. Now, this was a predominantly like 98% white area. So I found myself in the grocery store, and the Muslim Indians was over here, and about 8 or 9 of them. And then the white people was over there, and I found myself inching over towards the Muslim. I was kind of scared. Now, you know, that was a weirdness for me. And it honestly didn't happen. I don't mean to laugh, I'm very serious. There's been a lot of things, of course, in the news, and they're feeling more insecure. So they're going and shooting up churches, shooting up Nevada. And I actually found myself, normally it's the other way around, but I found myself over there pulling close to the Muslims. I was like, and that's the truth, because I was watching them. I just had to give you that tidbit because I got out of body experience for me. I've never felt or seen myself.
It's actually a good segue because I do want to take a few minutes and see if I might find a volunteer to do this role play.
Oh, I like role play.
So, who said that?
I did.
Venita.
Venita?
Yes, I like role play.
Look at page 6 of the agenda. Mistakes, what to do when you F up, by Aisha Pandit. Mistakes made in good faith, like I didn't mean to mispronounce her name, but I probably did. Mistakes made in good faith are an inevitable consequence of intersectional work that moves us beyond our comfort zones. Eesha Pandit offers strategies for reacting when a mistake happens for both the offender and offended, especially when involved in intersectional work where conflicts and misunderstandings are inevitable. Her suggestions include apologizing, not conflating the issue, asking how to make amends, realizing trust may never be rebuilt with this person, continuing doing the work and learning along the way, and for the offended to remember our own mistakes. So, number one, there is an unscripted role play scene between an offender and offended. And so I haven't written anything, that's why it's unscripted, but let's see if we might try to take a couple of minutes and do something spontaneous with that. And part of my motivation is just, you know, what we've been talking about on and off throughout the evening, that every time you turn on the evening news, there is this mass murder that has occurred somewhere, or even on a micro level, but it's like, like we don't seem to have any tools in our toolbox working through problems when they occur between individuals. And so, the reason I said earlier, like, I can't get this Jerry Springer, teachers are not magical, image of Susanna Morris sitting in a class watching Jerry Springer, because I think that's what has been going on. I think that's why we are losing the to just kind of work through problems. I mean, she's talking about your mistakes are inevitable when you're doing intersectional work, but mistakes are inevitable when you're a human being. Whenever you're interacting with anybody, at some point, there's going to be a misunderstanding. And really, it ought not to be the end of the world. And so, as a super micro contribution to showing a model of how to work through a conflict, I'm looking for a volunteer. Who wants to volunteer? Venita, were you volunteering?
Yes.
Do you want to be the offender or the offended?
Oh, wow.
Venita said, hold up.
I'll be the offended. You be the offender.
You'll be the offender. I'll be the offender.
Yeah.
All right, let me see.
Because you've been ran out of places before. I haven't.
Right, let me see. What can I? How? Let me see. How can I offend you? I don't really like that hat that you're wearing. I don't think it does anything for you.
Look at Venita's face.
I'm like, well, I like my hat. Actually, I love my hat. What about my hat don't you like?
Did I hurt your feelings? I'm sorry. I didn't, I wasn't trying to hurt your feelings. I I don't like that style hat.
Oh. Well, I like my hat. And I feel good about my hat.
Wait a minute, Venita. I need what? Nicole.
Uh-huh.
You opened the, what's the essay called? Making Movement Mistakes. It's on page 164 if you have the book. You have the book or you have the?
I have it on my Kindle.
Can you get to that? Or Kim,
yes.
Can you get?
Yes, I'm looking at it now. I'm in my Kindle now.
Okay.
I guess you're not offensive enough, Michelle.
Huh?
I guess you're not offensive enough.
And I think the familiarity is, you know, one of the things that kind of thwarts that, because you all know each other, but in movement spaces, like when you don't really know people, but we've come together to, you know, as a result of a common cause, but we don't really know each other yet, you know, then it's like, okay, well, now you done piss me off, you know?
Okay.
You know, I have a chapter up.
We should pretend we're in that mode then.
So Nicole, what I want you to do is, you see the points 1, 2, 3, 4, the suggestions for how to work. Right. So if you would, you know, read one point, and then we'll try to act that out. So I'll be Ariel. I'll be a white woman.
Oh, now we're talking. Okay.
And we'll be doing some kind of intersectional work, Black woman. And I'm going to use a situation, a play on something I heard Kim talk about a long time ago.
Okay. All right. So should I start off with the reading, or are you going to start off with the role play?
Well, first, let me say the offensive thing, and then let Venita react to it, and then you tell us. Excuse me, young lady. Can you bring me some coffee?
Sure. No problem. Mary, you have a cup too? Jane, you have a cup too?
See, this is why I love y'all. See, this right here. See, first, Venita's face is priceless, right? Like, I just need a still, just a shot of her face.
I'm like, no, I'm spitting that coffee.
You see what I'm saying? So I still know that we have objectives, we have goals. You know, this white lady. But no, I'll get you a cup of coffee. Can I get one for you?
No, Venita, you're supposed to react being offended, not, oh yes,
But that's what's sad about me. So you do know me. And usually what I do is I fall back. I get really upset, I'll just fall back. So that's my situation of falling back. Now call me something else, and then you'll see what I do for you. Uh-oh, I'm talking right now.
Okay, well, here's what the book says.
Girl, come here. Go get my coffee.
Oh, now that's a different tone. Jane. Ooh. Jane, come here, honey. Come here. Come over here. I'm waiting for everyone, because I'm not going to embarrass Jane to get to Jane, but I'm going to take her in the corner. Jane, where I come from, people get cut when they say, go get my coffee. So I'm not going to sing, Jane, because I don't want to touch you. Okay? So I want you to go carry your ass back over there, Jane. Jane, if you could praise Jesus, I'm allowing you to. That's
I can't.
I'm going to get some water, and I'll be back with you in a few minutes, Jane. Get back over there and do what you need to do. See, I'm in the corner with Jane. I come next to my life.
All right, Nicole,
Okay, so first, apologize sincerely. When doing this, think carefully about the best approach. It might not be in person, or it might be. It might need to be public. It might need to be done one-on-one. This depends on the nature of the mistake, but nothing else can happen until you acknowledge your mistake.
Okay, well, it was private. It was one-on-one. And I made sure she acknowledged her mistake, because she was actually off being cut. And now we're going to go back over here, and Jane's going to go over there and do what she's doing. I'm going to have me a glass of water so I can absorb my self-control. I'm so proud of me. And I'm going to go over to the group.
All right, well, I need to apologize. I need to, apparently, I'm sorry, I hurt your feelings. I was thirsty. I didn't mean to offend you. I apologize.
Okay, Jane. But Jane, in the future, I want to let you know you're dealing with the same Black woman. That might not be the case. What you need to do, Jane, is you to watch your tone. Coffee, okay, baby? I won't accept Jane's apology. So Jane, own that and sit on that, because I'm not feeling good, and I will never feel you. Give her some good advice. Is that not?
That was good.
You all okay. Nicole, what else are we supposed to do?
Then she says, okay, so the next thing is the offender can't conflate the mistake and the apology with anything else. The apology is not the time to try and fix the coalition or your relationship. It's not the time to make your broader political statement. It's a time to do just one.
Unfreeze.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then she goes on to say, ask what amends might be made if that applies. Ask the person, team, group what might help. Ask without prescribing the answer. Wait. Listen, and then decide whether this is something you can or cannot do. Be honest about that. And then finally, realize that trust is easier to break than rebuild. Your relationship or relationships might not ever be the same. And of course, it might get even stronger, but you can't know that. You can't have an end game in your apology. You have to say it, do what you can to fix it, and not expect more than that. And then keep doing the work as best as you can, learn from it, and don't make the same mistake again. But what I found relevant in that role play is that Venita does see that was very symbolic for me. Like when I read texts from the Black feminist or Black women's studies tradition, generally like what we saw with Audre Lorde, and they have to call out the mistakes that white feminists made. And so, and it's like trying to get that person to see the error of her ways. And it's precisely immediately what Venita did. Like, okay, hold on. Now look, that is not how you do things. And I'm just wondering when people call us, they want to attach that angry Black woman label. It's hard for me to kind of, because it's not like we want to go immediately to the top or escalate. We try to first, let's handle it at this level before I have to, go to the other levels. So that was very interesting for me to look at that role play.
Oh, good. But yeah, no, but seriously, I do think, we were being silly and whatnot, but in all our spaces, all of our relationships, we could benefit from some practice. Now, Venita and I know, you know, we get mad at each other all the time and stop talking to each other, and when we get ready to talk, we just, you know, call and cuss each other out and keep on moving. But we just always thought, you know, it never occurred to us that a relationship would end because there was a conflict.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are always conflicts. If you have a relationship, there will be
conflict. Yeah.
You know, whether you're good at it or bad at it or somewhere in between, we all need to learn some kind of method of resolving conflicts and doing so and as stresslessly as possible. And I think it's a real deficit in the human community that is getting worse. I mean, you know, what we see coming out. Well, see, I'm not even going to say the orange one's name today.
Don't do it. Don't do it tonight. I'm feeling good. I want to be right where I'm at.
Yes. It's 6:30. So let's call it a night. Thank you, everyone, for sharing.
Before we do, I'm sorry. I feel like I'm a little excluded here, but I just wish we had Leonie because this is her lane, the nonviolent communication, which talks about conflict resolution and what do they call it? Resolution circles.
Yes.
So there is a lot of opportunity. So maybe that might be something that we can explore more. And I did like that you asked Nicole to read those helpful hints because they were very helpful. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Kim. Thank you. Yeah, you know how in previous books we've done like feminism or, you know, some little special segment. And I kind of gave some thought in the beginning of this book special. I didn't want to do Find the Feminism again because the whole book is feminism in your family. So I don't know, but you're right. Movement work does really put people on the fast track to conflict. And it might really be great to have Leonie, you know, giving some tips or something.
And the one thing that I did see in the role play is that I find that the victimization stance can be taken when you correct somebody. That makes it even triple harder, more complex to deal with the fact that all of a sudden you're the one who is offended and now you are the abuser. Just because you said, hey chick, that doesn't work for me. And you know, you step out of your role of I'm here to make you comfortable. There's a comfortability that we are charged with every time we're in diverse groups.
Yes.
So I love the role playing, and I think that will put us in good stead if we did more of that.
That's a very powerful observation, Kim. Absolutely. Wow.
If I may say one thing, although we were being silly, that's actually the way I would handle it.
Right.
I mean, I'm being silly with this, but in a more sophisticated business setting, I would have pulled Jane to the side at my first chance. It might not have been at that moment, but within that amount, I would have pulled her to the side and I would have said, Jane, just what I said. It probably been a more serious way. Of course, it would have been, but I would have let Jane, I would have checked her right then. So
Yeah.
whether she does it or not to anyone else, she certainly would think twice when she spoke to me. Meanwhile, I would smile graciously and go back to the group because I was doing one thing. But I had to check Jay.
But I would cut you. It was the joking
I'll
part.
be honest with you, I would have handled it. And I have done that in situations.
Yes.
But I think the fact that you
Like
I would cut you, that's the joking part.
If your child misbehaves while you're out, you can't wait till you get home an hour and a half later and say, Johnny, I didn't appreciate you knocking all the cans down in the grocery store. That was not a good look. You got to take Johnny to the side then and let Johnny know there's a way that we conduct ourselves in the grocery store. I don't mind if you look around, touch things, but we got to be careful because we make a mess, so on and so forth.
Yeah. I didn't hear what you were saying either, Kim. Like it was, I don't know. I could, it was like an echo when you said something.
It's how you take somebody aside. So when you're saying that I'll cut you, I think that was the humor, and I think that was the funny part. I'm in a similar situation, and I write down the offenses, and we're up to offense number 15 with the same person.
Now, see, that's not good. That's cumulative. That's why you can't do that.
It's always something where you are learning the ropes of how to deal with me as a peer on my time. And so every time you keep thinking that I'm boo-boo the cleaning lady, I have to keep saying to you, you are not going to bend down to help me up. It's just that relationship is not going to work for me.
Right.
It's just not going to work for me. And so then when you bring it up time number 7, and then incident number 8 happens, you feel like, okay, so this is systemic because we are all in this water of racism together. And this is somebody who may be living like this 40, 50, 60, 70 years, and they're not going to get it just because I pulled them to the side that one time. So it's like how do you deal with the fact that America told you that I was beneath you, and you don't even realize in what ways you think I'm beneath you because you've not dealt with people like me. Usually everybody's trying to make you comfortable.
I don't know, Kim.
Yeah,
right. Kind of what along the lines of what I was thinking when Nicole was talking earlier about her generation looking at our generation and the trauma of being among the first to in these integrated situations, that to me, we're dealing with deeply ingrained stuff. I don't think it's reasonable to expect that it's going to change within the space of a generation or even a couple of generations. And that, that's why I'm always talking to you all about the 500-year plan, because I think that really we have to start looking at it like that, because I was listening today to a radio program that I listened to in the morning. I know it's time for us to go, but they were pushing the need to vote and talking about all the people who died and yada yada yada, so we could vote. And it's tragic to me. It's tragic to me that so soon after we gained the right to vote, we became turned off to the process, and so many of us just don't even care about it. And so I think that we have to start really getting into looking into what are our expectations of change, looking at stuff that is deeply, deeply, deeply ingrained, not only in the American psyche, but in humanity. And we're not going to change it overnight. And so, but when we start to make a little bit of progress and then we take 2 steps back because the little bit of progress that we made wasn't far enough,
Mm-hmm.
That's a problem.
Yeah. Yep.
Anyway, Leonie is not here. We were going to stay afterwards and have, some discussion.
Okay.
A part of it was about doing a holiday special, though, so maybe we should talk about that for a minute. Nicole?
Okay. Yeah, I have a few minutes before I have to run off to class, so.
Okay, well, let me stop the broadcast. And
Okay.
for everyone who has joined us, so we will see you next week reading our story together. And thank you for joining us.
2 weeks.
Bye.
Goodbye.
2 weeks. That's right. We're going to
2
take a break
weeks.
next week.